July the 1st marks both the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China and the anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. But President Xi Jinping decides to go to Hong Kong in commemoration of suspending the British colonial rule. What has the one country, two systems mechanism brought for Hong Kong? How shall we handle the internal grievances of Hong Kong young people about their upward mobility? And how will the newly elected SAR government exercise the principle of governing Hong Kong by local Hong Kong people, where universal suffrage gets controversial? To discuss these and more, today I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Dr. Patrick Ho Chi-ping, former Home Affairs of Hong Kong SAR government, and Xu Qingduo, current affairs commentator with China Radio International. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui.
Hong Kong, home to the most stunning skyline in the world.
This is a city of immigrants. There were actually no Hong Kongers in the first place. Most of these people came from the Chinese mainland, some earlier, some later.
But it all began in a very humble way. The small village in southern China was just a speck on the map until the British took it over and made it a colony. But what makes Hong Kong special was not what the colonists brought, but what the colonized did. In a matter of decades, Hong Kong became one of the freest and most vibrant economies in the world.
Against the odds, Hong Kong has grown its own culture of diversity and way of life.
In 1997, Hong Kong returned to China, but its autonomy and uniqueness remained. Actually, the city showed its best fighting an epidemic and financial predators. But one thing Hong Kong should never fight is motherland, which has always lent its strength to the region.
The clock tower was the oldest building in Hong Kong and the tallest back then. In 1915, it was part of the railway station that linked Hong Kong with the Chinese mainland.
Even today, Hong Kong still serves as a bridge connecting the Chinese mainland with the world. But the link is not without tests.
Hong Kong is a tiny place, probably the most crowded on the earth. So people learn to compete for space. Space to live, space to work, and also a space to make a political voice.
As a special administrative region, growing pains and political confusions have clouded the eyes of many and troubled the lives of even more. With the rest of China rising, Hong Kong is being passed over. Hong Kong has lost some of its former glory. Its people are struggling to find their place in the nation.
This is Victoria Park, one of the open spaces in Hong Kong. People come here to rally, to protest, and also to do morning exercises.
The park is like the city. Nobody knows if you came from Shanghai, Guangdong, or Fujian, and nobody cares. They came here to make a difference. Sometimes they rub against each other, or stand in the way of one another. But always, they find a way to lift up together. 周月 CGTN Hong Kong.
Welcome to our discussion here, gentlemen. The first question actually reminds me, or you, of perhaps what Ronald Reagan asked on one of the campaign trails with Walter Mondale. Are you better off? And everybody, or most of the voters said, yes, we were better off. We are better off than before. Now, the question is Hong Kong better off than it was 20 years ago? In what ways, Ho?
I really think that it is better off. Hong Kong is more competitive than ever before, and most of its fundamental is still quite healthy. If you look at the statistics, the stats, the data, it all points out to that Hong Kong had really progressed quite a bit for the last 20 years, and economically, and also its international status is still retaining its is powerful the reign in the financial field as ever before. And well, it's also riding in the on the tailwind of China's rise. And I think that, and Hong Kong, for that matter, has been progressing very well and doing a very good job in that.
Qingduo, as a senior observer of international regional affairs, do you share the pride of Hong Kong people about their prosperity and stability since 1997?
I would say overall, Hong Kong maintained its prosperity and stability. But the question you asked is a general question. It's really up to the individual ones living Hong Kong residents. If they ask them to answer the question, you might get different answers. For example, some of the people, they live in the so-called narrow cubicles, so-called coffins. The number of them, like 200,000, they say, the number increased like twice over the past 10 years. And also the widening gap between rich and poor is also a problem to those people living in the bottom of the society. They would probably give different answers.
Overall, do you think the principle of one China, two systems has succeeded?
Absolutely. The principle of one country, two system was implemented then to do two things, to accomplish two purposes. One is to see that the transition back to the mother's land is smooth and effortless and eventful, non-eventful. Number two is to ensure the Hong Kong people that they can keep their original style of life. And I think that has been done as well. So for that matter, the one country, two system has accomplished what it started out to accomplish.
Following the handover in 1997, 20 years ago, I believe there still exists a formidable presence of the British and overseas business community in Hong Kong, to say nothing of the strong legacy of the British colonial rule that lasted for 1.5 centuries before the return of Hong Kong. Now, what do you think of the impact of a British colonial legacy on the Hong Kong people as well as the way Hong Kong has been governed?
Well, I think, there are some legacies, I would say, that is still strongly supported by not only people in Hong Kong, but also people in the mainland, such as the rule of law, the transparency, and also the efficiency of the Hong Kong government, and also the business society in terms of doing business and the easiness of doing business in Hong Kong. That's really something Hong Kong feel proud of.
And perhaps ICAC has also set a very good example in protecting the integrity of the SCR government.
Exactly. And at the same time, of course, you see there's some the colonial past. You see Victoria Park, the name of the park, and also we know the controversy when the government was trying to introduce this so-called patriotic education, basically national education or national conditions, and then it was branded as like a brainwashing. While at the same time, people look. 20 years ago, Hong Kong was governed by someone imposed by the British monarchy, but 20 years later, after 1997, you have one of Hong Kong people governing Hong Kong. I think that's a progress.
Government of the people, for the people, and by the people, instead of being appointed by Queen of the United Kingdom. Do you think that has made a big difference?
Absolutely, it has made a big difference because the Hong Kong people can now exercise the voting rights, although somewhat indirectly, just like the American election is indirect election. But Hong Kong people can decide on whom they want to be governing them. I think the Hong Kong people have a say in doing that.
Do you believe Hong Kong is completely a mature democracy where freedom of speech is fully respected? And Chen Wanying, one of the most outstanding professors of the Hong Kong Chinese University, said to me, Ray, it's not that we didn't enjoy enough democracy or freedom of speech. She said we had enjoyed too much of it. Look at the abusive use of soft porn pictures for the cover stories of many of the journals in Hong Kong. She said she had been shocked. I wonder if you have traveled to Hong Kong and witnessed the new realities in the territory.
Let me say this. I agree with her. I tend to agree with that. For any concept or whatever, like a political system, like a democracy or freedom, it's like a coin. It has two sides. If you go over with it, probably you're abusing it. Well, like national conditions education is being branded as like a brainwashing. Well, when you talk about this independence of Hong Kong, that's somehow called like academic freedom. I would say, is there a problem with that? And also, remember the new legislator, young legislator in the swearing ceremony, they basically abused that chance or that opportunity. They don't say Republic of China, they say something else. They don't say China, they say China. This is unacceptable. This is not about the freedom of speech. This is totally humiliating, not only to Hong Kong people, but also to the whole of China.
In the immediate aftermath of the handover in 1997, Hong Kong survived a most devastating financial crisis in Asia.
Indeed.
Can you brief us on the ability of the ICI government in handling this financial crisis and why it had been able to survive unscathed?
Well, ever since the handover, for the last 20 years, Hong Kong has endured or lasted through two financial crises. One is in the Asia financial crisis starting in 1997 and 1998, and the second one is the burst of the IT bubble. This is around the turn of the century. Then the third one is the Lehman Brothers, the 2008 financial crisis. But Hong Kong has endured not only the three crises, but it has come out of these crises doing even better than ever before. Because we have the big China behind us. I think China was able to support us in a way that we cannot describe, you see, because we have the big hinterland and given us the type of support that other countries do not have, other economic systems do have. And that's the beauty of the one country, two system. We have the advantages of the capitalistic system in Hong Kong, and yet we can draw upon all the goodies that's come down southwards from the socialist system from mainland China.
What do you think should be the driving force behind the resilience that characterizes the governance of Hong Kong, as well as the ethos of the locals in Hong Kong?
I think Hong Kong people have been known as this being resilient. And this is a free market economy. You have to work really hard to take care of yourself and your family members and to make it, especially for young people. So this is something, it's like a strong legacy, generation after generation is being passed down from the forefathers to nowadays young people. I think this is something really precious. This is a precious gift. Hong Kong should keep it instead of losing it. And of course, like 2008, 2003, the SARS crisis, after that, there is a arrangement, the so-called CEPA, closer economic relationship, like a linkage arrangement, between the mainland and Hong Kong. Basically, as Mr. He pointed out, there's a strong support from the central government, from the mainland. You have 1.4 billion people, cousins, supporting you. So this is a really huge advantage.
One of the most important think tanks in the United States, the Traditional Heritage Foundation, Hong Kong remains the freest economy in the world, and that really surprised me.
And 23 years in a row.
For 23 years running. I mean, this is amazing. Why?
Well, because Hong Kong has its pillars for successes, and it has all the fundamentals, and they are all been there ever before. Number one, it has a level playing field. Number two, it has a free economy. Number three, it has a simple and low tax system. Number four, it has a very efficient and small government. And number five is a freest economy in the world. That's because goods can get in and out of Hong Kong, capital can in and out of Hong Kong, people can in and out of Hong Kong, and also the information can get in and out of Hong Kong. And for that, Hong Kong rely on these five pillars of successes, and they is what make Hong Kong today.
Very much like in the case of Macau, where I was there to cover the handover, and locals were talking about the implications of having PLA troops deployed in Hong Kong and in Macau. They were talking about whether the troops would step in to get involved in the local law and order protection. Now, what has happened to the local garrison of the PLA? I was told that the locals could go and visit the barracks
Yes.
of the PLA. Has the local garrison been able to keep the door open always, particularly during the weekends?
I think there are certain occasions, and they have open houses, and they have exhibitions, and they have invited the local people to visit the garrison. And one thing that's really striking is before the handover, we can see British soldiers around town, in the bars, in the streets, you know, mixing with the local people. But after the handover, the PLA soldiers do not come to town. They are in the garrisons, and they're happily there. And then the people from around the city visit them in the garrison. So it's a very, very well-disciplined garrison, so to speak.
What do you think of the Occupy Central movement that has really generated a lot of headlines about the unrest in Hong Kong? Whether that has affected the efficiency and the governance of Hong Kong?
No, I really do not think so. I think the Occupy Central movement has really awakened the Hong Kong people in a way that they really have to think hard what sort of Hong Kong they want and who are really running Hong Kong, you see. And in 1997, we have a very smooth transition. And on June 30th to July 1st, you know, people slept and people woke up, and lo and behold, from last night you were still a colonial citizen, and today you become a citizen of the of Hong Kong, the special administrative zone, and not one bullet was fired, no struggles, there was no toils, and just change a flag. We change a chief executive from a governor, change to the chief executive, and the whole transition was very smooth, and the people did not undergo an awakening of a transition of their identity. And it's now 20 years later, then they suddenly realize that, oh yes, we are now master of our own territory. And whom do we want? What sort of Hong Kong should it be? And who should be running Hong Kong? And what identity should we assume to have? I think this is very important for the Hong Kong people. It is awakening.
Yes, indeed. And one of the former SAR chief executives were put on trial on charges of corruption. But these headline-making stories have really shocked readers and netizens in the mainland. What do you make of the rule of law in Hong Kong?
Well, I think this is again another, if we call it legacy, this is really something Hong Kong is proud of. That's why when we compare Hong Kong with other mainland cities like Shanghai, like Shenzhen, we say one strength Hong Kong enjoys is really the rule of law. People do have a strong belief, in the rule of law, in the legal system, in the judicial independence. So, whoever breaks the law, probably due punishment will be given. I mean, as long as people have this strong belief, this society, you can say, basically is well run.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Dr. Patrick Ho Chi-ping, former Secretary for Home Affairs of the Hong Kong SAR government under the leadership of Teng Chi-hua, the first Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR following the return in 1997. We are pleased to be joined here by Xu Qingduo, our regular commentator from China National Radio, or CRI. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. There's no question about the prosperity of the Hong Kong economy. However, Hong Kong drew not only attention but the fire from Western countries over the issue of universal suffrage, namely direct election of the chief executive. How has the SAR government handled this, and what do you think of the response from the mainland authorities?
I think the mainland authority is really putting the words written in the basic laws and really into practice by pushing ahead with the universal suffrage step by step in a very graduated fashion. And what was put out by the Standing Committee of the People's Congress has been well known and has been acceptable in Hong Kong, but yet being viewed by the opposition as not progressive enough to measure up to the so-called the standards of universal suffrage, and that has been opposed by the opposition party in the Legislative Council in Hong Kong.
What do you think of the controversy?
Well, I think, when we talk about like democracy, it's an abstract concept. If you look at the election system in the United States, it is different from the election system in France, different from Germany, different from the United Kingdom. So basically, for every place, every city, every country, you want to have your own system which is suitable to your own needs. And also, I agree. I think, for Hong Kong, the introduction of democracy, introduction of a direct election or suffrage should be carried out in a gradual step. Remember, like 20 years ago in 1997, before that, there was no such a thing called democracy or election. And you were run by someone from London, and also basically the cabinet is filled with British business people, and also the garrisons are British soldiers. So nowadays, it's only 20 years. Remember, I would say it's still a short period of time compared with Hong Kong and the rule of the United Kingdom for about 100 years.
Patrick, have you ever met with Governor Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong before 1997? Has he reviewed the trajectory of Hong Kong's development ever since the handover? Because he was urging the legislation about, he was urging the passing or approval of a legislative package on the eve of the handover, and that drew a lot of criticism from Beijing.
That's correct.
Do you think he's been positive about the Hong Kong ever since, or he still thinking what's going to happen next?
Of course, he always wished that the speed of democratization in Hong Kong could be a whole lot faster, as manifested by what he did in 1997 by introducing almost universal suffrage to the Hong Kong Legislative Council. And as was said before, it's only 10 years before that the whole Legislative Council was still totally appointed, and representative government in a very limited form was only introduced towards the end of the British rule. And all of a sudden, the last governor, Governor Patten, wished to immediately open the gate, the floodgate, and let everybody in, and started the election right, left, and center. I think the Hong Kong people may not be prepared for that at that point in time. And even today, I think we have democratization is a process. And we don't only need voting rights, we need participatory democracy. That means the people of Hong Kong really know what they are voting for and what is really democracy is all about. I think this is the spirit of democracy is more important than the process of one person, one vote. And also, there's no so-called standard democracy formula that we can adhere to. And there's no ideal system of democracy that we really should look up to. If you look up to the United Nations, every country has its own system of democracy, and Hong Kong will, last and behold, have its own system of democracy.
What do you think of the efforts, if any, made by the ICR government to decolonize the British legacy? For example, education about patriotism. These young people remember more about two systems than one country, and it seems one country doesn't exist. They would only say, we are Hong Kong people, we are not Chinese. Very much like those in Taiwan, particularly young people, they have developed a pretty vague idea about the national identity of being Chinese. In fact, they have almost forgotten the origin of their ethnicity. So what do you think of the similar problems for young Hong Kong people?
Yeah, I think looking back for the last 20 years, and Hong Kong has really achieved quite a bit. And also, there have been quite a bit of misgivings about what we have missed out for the last 20 years. One thing is the national education. It's really teaching our young people what one country's school system is all about. And of course, in the beginning, everybody wants to retain the original way of life, of capitalistic way of life in Hong Kong, and that's why they are very carefully safeguarding the capitalistic way of life and make it very distinctive from the socialistic way of life in mainland China. They emphasize more on the distinctiveness and the differences between the two, the difference between the two systems, rather than the one country, which is the prerequisites of the two systems. But one country, two system was built so that the two systems can interact with one another, can get the good things from the other system to supplement what they don't have in the other system. And we have seen that the system in mainland China has taken a lot of good things from the system in Hong Kong, in open market, in the governance of managerial personnel, and so on and so forth, and getting the economy up in the mainland China. But Hong Kong has not learned from the mainland system of how to interact with that.
And I'm afraid yet another embarrassing challenge for the SER chief executive is that he or she doesn't have a ruling party to support them. You know, your mandate could only come from a majority in the parliament. And yet, it seems the Legislative Council in Hong Kong is completely independent from the executive branch. Prime Minister Theresa May held a referendum in the hope of getting a majority. She failed. And Emmanuel Macron, the young 39-year-old president of France, surprisingly got a majority in the parliamentary elections to support the mandate that he badly needs for executing his ideas and getting his job done. Yet in the case of Hong Kong SAR government, I'm afraid the chief executive doesn't have their own political party. Do you think this political design has seriously gone wrong?
Well, it is the nature of the beast. And, you know, according to the basic laws in Hong Kong, the chief executive cannot belong to any political parties. And so he has to, in order to have political neutrality as far as, you know, ruling Hong Kong is concerned. Okay? But that's being said,
but in that case, he or she is likely to face the majority rebellion, opposition. The groups and the lawmakers in the Legislative Council, they might be a strong voice in opposition to whatever he says.
That's exactly right. And that's why really the mandate of the chief executive has to come from the people. And to come from people rather than from
but
the
do you have the
Council.
channels to go to the general public? And let me say it again. Does the SAR chief executive has his or her channel to go directly and reach out directly to the electorate?
Absolutely. Hong Kong is a small place, and the chief executive can visit all the 18 districts every day of the month. Okay, and I think the mandate has to come from the people rather than from the institution.
I wonder the newly elected SAR chief executive would be following Governor Chris Patton's way of addressing the audience with a radio speech, right? Before the handover, he was addressing the audience and the listeners directly. Whatever controversies surrounding the legacy and legislative package of this governor, who is now Vice Chancellor of the Oxford University.
That's correct.
He did something to impress the viewers. That's why he still enjoyed some popularity. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for interviewing.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Goodbye.